For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/Bruce Poinsett. What's up, everyone? It's Bruce. Today, I want to talk about how community organizations in the suburbs can better leverage their privilege to engage with the police. Oftentimes when we look at these discussions around police profiling, brutality, it's focused on the city, quote unquote, urban areas, Black and Brown communities, because, that's kind of the epicenter of where it happens. But as many people know, obviously, discrimination, harassment, profiling, brutality, these things do also happen in the suburbs. But in addition to that, there is a discussion around how to actually engage with the police in these areas. And one of the things that happens is you have community organizations, built genuinely built around the idea of racial justice, social justice, that emerge. And they do try to actually use their privilege in a way to engage with the police and try and enact change. Unfortunately, what happens is this very song and dance type of meeting process, or really cycle that goes nowhere. So what does that look like? Basically, what will happen is there'll be an inquiry, or maybe an incident will arise where someone says, "Oh my goodness, what happened? My kid was discriminated against. I was pulled over in this way. I was talked to this way, or I was wrongfully arrested. I was beaten. You know what? We need to look into the training. Let's set up a meeting with, the chief of police, the trainer, whoever else they bring." And again, this comes from a genuine place, and people want to, get down to the details so they can, you know, structurally fix things. But the problem, excuse me, that arises is these meetings, they're just, it's just talk. It's, the police come in with a script. The people who are in the community organizations trying to engage them don't really, don't know what to focus on. And police, quite frankly, just take advantage of that. And what you get, again, is just a cycle of talking about the same things, but not really going anywhere. And, it just becomes a missed opportunity that, best case scenario, it opens up lines of communication. But more often than not, if there are people, especially in the organization, who are really trying to push for real structural change, it's just discouraging. So let's talk a little bit more about why this is a missed opportunity, though. One, with the suburbs, we talk about defunding the police, and it's often framed as this extreme thing. But these suburban settings, like where I grew up in Lake Oswego, Oregon, are, they're a testing ground. They're a proving ground for the fact that, a less militaristic, a less, you know, the less the police look like an occupying force, it works. When, they treat, white kids with kitty gloves for things that, again, you know, maybe they are illegal by the law, but, they're not throwing the book at them. They're not, treating them like animals for drug possession, for drug dealing, for all kinds of nonviolent crimes, even for stuff that, is generally structurally detrimental to countless people, such as, these massive white collar crimes that, again, you have people who are quite overrepresented in these wealthy suburbs who are committing them. But again, when the police don't treat that area like an occupying force, things seem to work well, and things, the community isn't any less healthy for it. So that's one. But then also, when we talk about how a lot of these conversations are centered in the city or centered where, you know, a lot of Black and Brown communities are, and the police, again, act as an occupying force, the thing about a lot of those officers is they don't live in those communities. They live in Lake Oswego, they live in Beaverton. So during the day, they may be occupying these communities, but then they go back to the suburbs at night. And they also, take the money that they get from those jobs and they're paying taxes in their suburbs. And that's a whole discussion about, just taking money out of the community to, in a lot of cases, terrorize the community. But the bigger point is that these are data points about the relationship between the suburbs and the city, and communities that are seemingly disconnected, but actually, again, all of this is intertwined. And these data points are important for us to keep in mind when we're thinking about ways to apply pressure to create real change, because clearly acting in good faith doesn't seem to be working. Now, let's talk some more about these meeting tactics and what happens. I've been in enough of these, and I've been in the song and dance. So first things first is you're usually going to get an officer, the chief, the training person, who, the group is most likely to get along with. Like any department that's worth its salt is not usually going to bring in the actually problematic cop or problematic cops that people have complained about. They're going to bring in the guys, that you would actually enjoy talking to, that, may actually care about, enacting change, might be serious about it. And, one that kind of, tones down your energy, because again, when you're talking with the people who, may actually care, is a difference between talking with the majority of the department and talking with the union that's, going to defend bad actors to the death. So it disarms you, but that's not where it stops. So I talked earlier about, inquiries about training and how does the training work? And again, these come from a good place, but it's also used against people, because what will then happen is this long talk about, well, we do this for our DEI trainings, and look at how many more hours we spend than other departments. And, if you let them, they will just regale you until, you actually have to stop them from talking about the trainings they do and the people they work with. And effectively, honestly, like, even if it's coming from a genuine place and, they get along with the trainers, they think it's important, it's still effectively hiding as a system. It's hiding behind these programs in terms of like skirting accountability. And then if that doesn't work, or even if it does, there's another tactic to really run out the clock on these meetings, which is the long explanations of, certain policies, whether it be use of force, what they do, like if they're called in, instead about a quote unquote suspicious person. And again, it seems genuine. People are asking, like, how does this work? Because, community groups do want to understand. It's hard to dismantle a system if you don't understand how it works. The problem, again, though, is that the explanations of this are used to run out the clock on the meetings, to where a person will get super, super granular about the details of the policy and effectively talking about how it's supposed to be colorblind and, mistakes happen here, but this is how it works. Now, let me explain to you how it really works. And after a while, it just feels like someone is talking in circles and talking in circles and never getting to the point of like, but even if it's, you know, you want to say, well, it's the person's fault who called the police because they're discriminating, but then the police come and then something happens to, you know, this Black person, this brown person, and the system keeps happening and no one does anything about it. That's the problem. We have an issue. We have a clearly defined issue of discrimination where you have, you know, citizens and law enforcement system seemingly working hand in hand, even if it's not, you know, even if they're not coordinated. And it's a problem. It results in harassment. It results in wrongful arrests. It results in just making people, you know, feel unwelcome in a community. And it keeps happening and we're not doing anything about it. So any explanation, any long explanation about why the policy works the way it does, or, you know, reciting how it's written to me, doesn't ultimately solve the problem at hand. And if we're not talking about fixing the problem at hand in a meaningful way, then what are we talking about? And then finally, you know, after we've talked about the policies, we've talked about the trainings, you know, we've exchanged niceties, there will always be a talk about increasing representation. Because again, it's a, you know, the police started historically as slave catchers and has been a predominantly white institution in a predominantly white country that has enforced white supremacy. So you get what you get. And, you know, again, I think a lot of times when we talk to chiefs, we talk to training officers or others who talk about increasing representation, I do think in a lot of cases they're genuine. And except you're fighting against a system that is hostile to, you know, anything that bucks against this sort of white supremacist structure that it was created on. And, you know, even when officers come to you and talk about, you know, we've increased representation by this, or we're trying to do this and we're working really hard towards this. And a lot of cases they'll even ask you for help. And it, you know, again, it's, I don't think it's a nefarious thing, but it does, it's a subtle way of putting the burden back on you of saying, well, you really want to fix this problem? Help us. When you're talking about a system that is structurally hostile to me and is, you know, all the things that are, you know, making it that way, they're just bigger than, you know, me taking photos with you or me meeting, you know, with a potential officer you might want to recruit, or, you know, me saying nice things about you. It's, I could do all that, I could buy in, and plenty of people have. And what's the result been? What has actually changed? So those are some of the tactics, but let's talk about, you know, what doesn't come up in these meetings if, you know, you don't force the issue. First and foremost is the police union, perhaps the biggest obstacle in, you know, holding the worst actors in police departments accountable. Because no matter how egregious an incident is, no matter how many times people have watched a viral video of a cop clearly murdering someone, you're always going to have a union step in and, you know, defend them in terms of get them reinstated, you know, get this cleared from their record, get the public to believe that, you know, the person that was murdered on camera that they all watched was actually, you know, guilty and that it had to be done. And they'll lean on, you know, obviously, and they'll say it in the most sanitized way they can, but they lean on all the racist tropes. And it doesn't matter if it's a Black representative for the police union. I mean, look at Portland. Whenever these things happen, the union comes in and their only job is to defend the officers from any kind of accountability, and to try and get more money, more public money funneled into police departments. So, obviously, even if you're talking with a police chief, what can the police chief actually do with the union? But we'll return to that. The other thing, again, that is not going to come up unless you press the issue is hitting them where it actually hurts, which is defunding the police department. These people feel invincible because no matter what happens, if a politician, rings the alarm and says the public isn't safe, or the police union gets a real big pedestal to talk about, and really just scare people, then people are going to vote for giving more money to the police department. Or even on issues when we talk about discrimination, even that can be used as a means for gaining more funding by saying, well, we need more money for more trainings. And what are we going to do if we don't, we're not able to bring in this consultant and, fund this effort? But it's all just, it's paying people for overtime. It's paying people to come in and train, or quote unquote train officers, so that, when an incident happens, again, the department can hide behind, well, we did all this training and we just, we're really trying. But structurally, again, what changes? So you gotta, hitting the police in a way that actually, gets not just gets their attention, but has meaningful consequences. Defunding the police, putting that money in preventative services, putting that money anywhere else that actually, you know, creates conditions where we don't have to call the police. And again, this already happens in the suburbs. Like, that's already the reality. But then lastly, when you do these meetings, I told you earlier, they usually bring in the people you're most likely to get along with, whether it's the trainers, if you happen to have, a more reform minded, or at least, more personable police chief. They're going to bring in those people, the people you are most likely to get along with. The problem is, these are usually people who, when it actually comes down to like the changes you're looking to see, they can't really do anything. Like, a chief can, make a decision of, oh, this officer is suspended, or, this officer is fired. But again, the union's going to come in and say, hold on, you can't do that. And then you're going to have this arbitration process, and you see it all the time, where, even if an officer is fired, even if the officer is caught on video and it's a national scandal, once you've gone through this long, drawn out arbitration process, the officer usually gets reinstated. During that suspension process, they've been making, pay anyway. And usually really significant, downright mind-boggling pay, honestly. And yeah, there's a little bit of harm to the reputation, but in terms of like in the officer circles, it doesn't really matter. And they're able to just go to maybe, a department somewhere else, or in a small town where people don't know or don't care, and keep doing what they do. And it just cycles on and on and on. So, what are some more meaningful ways, if you're in, you're in a suburban group where, people aren't necessarily, hitting the streets every day to protest the police, how can you use your privilege to better engage cops? Well, first place I go is the city council. You want to, like, these are the people who are voting on the funding. And again, if the goal is to actually defund and take power away from these people who are abusing it, then you want to go to the city council and you want to work to elect reformers. You want to apply pressure to current councilors to vote for reform measures, to vote for defunding. You want people who are actually going to fight when these union negotiations come up. You want people who may very well just, fight to not just fight the unions in these negotiations, but fight to bring more people from the public into these negotiations so that the room isn't just stacked against reformers, just stacked against people who actually want radical change. And you want to be there, when it comes to city council in general, create a presence, let them know you, let them know you're going to be there. In my time, just as a former reporter, some of the most effective people I've seen are, those who just they've organized it to where they have a steady presence there in those meetings. And now it's a little bit harder with COVID, obviously, but that's where writing letters and sending emails and calling your city councilors helps, because you don't necessarily have to be there in person. But being a constant in their operations and letting them know you're not going anywhere, that it does a lot. But let's take it, now let's talk about the union. So, if you're not paying union dues, you're not a police officer, what exactly can you do against this force that seems, shameless and unaccountable? Well, one, you can do some research about who do they give money to, specifically politicians, because one of the things that, acts as a cover for the unions are, politicians who can choose whether or not they actually want to hold them accountable or apply pressure to them. So research what politicians are taking police union donations, and again, call them, send them emails, engage them, ask them some tough questions, because you got to use whatever lever you have to apply pressure. Then also, don't just take this information behind the scenes, make it public, educate, your community about how the police union operates, educate them about how they use a similar playbook in these instances of police brutality and defending bad officers, the quote unquote bad apples. Educate the public on how politicians run interference for them, and how it works through this donation system. And then lastly, if you want to take it to that next level, take a page out of the book of what happened in Seattle a couple years ago. The larger labor group in the city actually expelled the police union over its inability to respond to racism within its ranks. And that's actually a huge measure, because what it does is it isolates the police union and applies significantly more political pressure. Because one of the things that makes the union seem like it's unaccountable to the public is that it's part of a larger group of labor unions. And if they use their organizing power, because again, fighting for workers is important, it's necessary, but if they use their power to insulate the police union and its bad actions, then yeah, it's hard to touch them. But when you start really putting pressure on them, or really just like challenging them to take a stance on whether they're going to do something about this union that is clearly empowering racism and violent racism at that, then they have to make a choice. And whatever it takes to, you know, get people to say that, hey, this isn't okay, and you're not going to do this in our name, do that. And again, isolate the police union, educate people about the police union. Don't allow them to hide behind a bunch of rhetoric and behind the minutia of it all and hide behind this bureaucracy so that they can just operate without impunity. And lastly, that brings us back to the police. So, one thing when we talk about holding bad actors accountable is, make the call systemic and the action against it sustainable. I think one thing that happens, again, not out of any ill will, is we end up focusing on a particular officer and it becomes this fight to the death over whether one officer is going to get fired or suspended or remain fired or suspended. And it wears people down. And it's set up to do that. You get invested in it like it's, this, the main character of a movie or a play. And, you know, one after, however long it's drawn out, one decision to let this person off the hook is deflating. You've been emotionally drained just to get, just to lose to the system one more time. And it's, some people, they can keep going with that, but a lot, yeah, they drop off and it's understandable. So instead of letting them trap you in these individuals, make it systemic. Make it specifically, make it about defunding or even abolishing the police. Make that the call and the constant. Because that's a systemic thing. That's the thing that gets their attention. That's the thing that, it has legs and it's bigger than any individual officer. But then also, when we talk about actions, and I've seen countless cases where it's like, we are going to, do this protest of the police, and we're going to be out here at the police station every Sunday. And, first week, huge. Second week, a little less, but people are there. Week 3, tumbleweeds. It's not because people are bad people. It's just like there are, so many police departments and so many bad actors. There's so much else going on. It's just hard to, continue to capture people's attention. 2, to fight people's sense of burnout and hopelessness and being overwhelmed. And yeah, it is, to get people to continue coming out, to get the numbers you would like, it's hard. It is, it is real, genuine organizing, marketing work that a lot of people go into this. We don't have we don't have professional backgrounds in this. We're playing it by ear. So it's no wonder these things dissipate. So how do you make these actions more sustainable? One, figure out what's the critical mass you actually need to get the attention you desire. Like we always think, oh, we need as many people as possible. We need to flood this area. But again, it's hard to do once, never mind over a sustained period of time. Some people are good at it. Most of us, not so much. But you can actually get plenty of attention. You can get eyes and ears and put pressure on people with far less, with far less numbers, but just being strategic about it and knowing how many people do I need to be here to do whatever action it is you're doing and to get the right eyes on it so the story carries. so that it puts pressure on the police department. But then also, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit cheesy, but don't be afraid to make it fun. Make it a party protesting police. Make it something people want to come to beyond just, we're here for this serious, somber moment. And we're talking about real, again, somber issues. But again, don't be afraid to add a little element of levity and add something that, builds community and gives people a chance to just unwind a little bit while they're there while also doing something serious. But just to really just do something that people don't, not just that they can come back to, but actually want to come back to. And the other thing is when you do fun things, when you do something that's a little creative and a little bit goofy while also doing something serious, that's another way to gain the actual attention on it that you desire. Because let's take, the optimistic approach and say everyone's just able to get the numbers to all their things. Suddenly it's not news if you got 100 people at the police station because everyone's doing it. So you gotta stand out. You gotta be a little creative. And just one more point on getting a critical mass. I think this is very key when we talk about sustainability is if the number of if you cannot be there and things fall apart, it's not a critical mass. This should be something that doesn't require any one person to necessarily be there to keep it going, to make it work. So these are not, again, getting a critical mass, making it, fun and unique and eye catching in some kind of way, and making it sustainable without your presence. These aren't easy things. But we talk about doing this in a way, again, that can keep going. That seems to be what, is actually behind a lot of the things that do last, that do have success, that do achieve some of the goals they're trying to achieve when it comes to raising awareness. Now let's finally come back to where we started, which is the meetings. If you are going to go into these meetings, because for what it's worth, I do think there is something to keeping lines of communication open. I do think there's something to engaging in an actual discussion with people, even if they are your opposition. Like that can be very helpful. Now, I don't think you should just waste time and do it just because, but there is reason to talk. So, how can you make these meetings more effective? One, advocate for defunding, but also emphasize that it's not personal. Like we get into this talk about good cops and bad apples and all that. Who cares? Structurally speaking, police respond when things go wrong. You're afraid your home's going to get broken into, when a crime has been committed, whatever. That's when police respond. So investing more money into the police is really just investing more into incident response and solving these problems or solving other problems that don't require police with police. That the saying goes like, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So as opposed to that, which again, we've been doing and it's clearly not working, invest in prevention, invest in the things that serve the community and, decrease indicators for these incidents. Obviously a lot of stuff You talk about crime is tied to poverty. When you talk about just desperation and other things, like solving that is directly tied to investing in the community. So push, again, push for defunding and push for investment in community services, in programs that take care of people, that reduce poverty, that reduce hunger, that, bolster the arts, give people activities, give kids more stuff to do, invest in jobs. All of these things are better and can, again, be directly supported by defunding the police. But then also, because chances are you're not going to get a favorable response from that, but push for it anyway. Also, call out the rhetorical tactics. So when someone's kind of running the clock out with this long explanation of policy, or just telling you about the wonderful DEI training, call out that that's not, we get it, but that's not why we're here. This incident is happening, and what are we going to do about it? Because clearly these things you're talking about are not changing anything. The issue is discrimination. The incident is accountability. The issue is the structure of the department. And how are we going to fix that in a meaningful way? Because our people, our community members don't feel safe. People in our community aren't safe, and we need to take care of that immediately. Always bring it back there. What are we going to do? Can you help me or not? If not, thank you for your time, but we got to talk with some people who can. And then lastly, and this is the one where you probably really are not going to get a positive response or any, but go ahead and do it. Ask for some real intel. Like, most people, they're going to, there's the quote unquote thin blue line, and they aren't going to cross it, but go for it. See if you can, if this is a person, someone wants to establish real trust with you, have them prove it. Ask them for some real information. Try and get, some real stuff about, officers, inner workings, have someone actually put something, because have someone actually put something on the line for you, because the reality is in these meetings, you may not think it goes this way, but they're asking you to put yourself on the line for them. There's a lot of people who see you just like, oh, you're talking with the police and you're cordial with the police. I can't trust you. The police will use, when they talk about what they're doing to work on discrimination or educate their department, they'll talk about meeting with you in these press releases, in these press conferences. They'll gladly use your name to shield them, and that can really hurt you. So it shouldn't be a one-way street. And if they're not, if they're not willing to divulge anything, they're not willing to help you, take note. It's that simple. So hopefully this will help your, suburban community justice focused organization just be better about, using your time talking with the police to actually get some change, to actually push towards change, to actually apply real pressure, rather than just having, again, just an exchange of niceties and a bunch of circular talk about policies that doesn't actually go anywhere. Hopefully this helps. See you on the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the latest videos. Thank you.